In August of 1945, the guns finally fell silent. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, was over. Across America, church bells rang, factories shut down their night shifts, newspapers screamed headlines of victory. More than 16 million American men and women had served. They were promised honor, gratitude, a hero's welcome. But for millions of them, the real war began only after they came home. Because victory parades don't heal shattered minds, medals don't silence nightmares, and a nation eager to move on often forgets those who paid the price. This is the story America didn't like to tell. Chapter 1. Coming Home to a Strange Country. When soldiers returned from Europe and the Pacific, they expected relief. Instead, many felt alien in their own homeland. They had seen bodies stacked like firewood in concentration camps, friends vaporized by artillery, islands soaked in blood during amphibious landings, kamikaze pilots screaming into steel decks. Yet back home, civilians wanted normalcy. So, did you kill anyone? Was it exciting? You must be glad it's over. They didn't want to hear about the smell of burning flesh, the screams of wounded men at night, the guilt of surviving when friends didn't. Most veterans learned quickly, silence was safer than truth. Chapter 2. Shell Shock Without a Name. Today we call it PTSD. But in 1945, that term did not exist. Doctors used vague labels: battle fatigue, combat exhaustion, nervous breakdown. Many officers believed psychological trauma was weakness. Soldiers suffering panic attacks, flashbacks, or uncontrollable rage were often told, "Be a man." Others had it worse: forget it ever happened. Some veterans couldn't sleep without alcohol, jumped at sudden noises, became violent or withdrawn, couldn't hold jobs or relationships. But the government had no long-term mental health system for them. Psychiatric hospitals were overcrowded, therapy was rare, medication was primitive. Millions were left untreated. Chapter 3. The GI Bill, Promise and Reality. On paper, the GI Bill was revolutionary. It offered free college education, low-interest home loans, job training. For many white veterans, it worked, but the reality was unequal. Racial discrimination. Black veterans, especially in the South, were denied college admission, bank loans, housing opportunities. Local officials controlled access, and Jim Crow ruled. A black soldier could fight Nazis abroad and still be treated as second class at home. Bureaucratic nightmares. Many veterans couldn't navigate paperwork, waited years for benefits, were rejected for minor technicalities. Some simply gave up. Chapter 4. When Heroes Became Homeless. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, a disturbing pattern emerged. Veterans, once uniformed heroes, were now sleeping in alleyways, living in cars, drinking to numb memories, begging on city streets. They weren't lazy, they weren't criminals, they were broken by war and abandoned by peace. No national homeless veterans program existed. Police often treated them as vagrants, drunks, public nuisances. The same men who stormed Normandy were now being told to move along. Chapter 5. Family War Zones. War didn't end at the front line. It followed veterans into their homes. Many families lived with explosive tempers, emotional distance, domestic violence, alcoholism. Children grew up afraid of fathers who woke screaming at night. Wives were expected to be patient, to be silent, to be supportive. Divorce rates among veterans quietly rose, but society blamed families, not trauma. Chapter 6. The Shame of Survival. One of the most devastating wounds was survivor's guilt. Veterans asked themselves, why did I live? Why him and not me? Did I deserve to come back? Many punished themselves, refusing happiness, sabotaging success, living recklessly. Suicide, rarely reported, claimed thousands. Newspapers didn't call it PTSD. They called it tragic accident, personal trouble. Chapter 7. A country that wanted to forget. America was focused on economic boom, suburban life, Cold War fears. The nation needed optimism, not trauma. So veterans learned, don't talk about it, don't cry, don't ask for help. The war became movies, parades, simplified hero stories. The real suffering stayed hidden. When World War II ended, the U.S. government faced a challenge it had never encountered before. More than 16 million veterans needed medical care, mental health treatment, disability support, employment assistance. The Veterans Administration, VA, simply wasn't ready. Hospitals were understaffed, underfunded, outdated. Doctors were trained to treat physical wounds, not psychological trauma. Many veterans who sought help were told, "There's nothing wrong with you. You'll adjust in time. Others have it worse." For men already struggling with guilt and shame, this dismissal was devastating. Chapter 9. Psychiatric wards, help or punishment. For veterans whose symptoms became unbearable, there was often only one option: commitment to psychiatric hospitals. But these facilities were brutal by modern standards. Patients were subjected to electroshock therapy, heavy sedation, isolation, physical restraints. There was little understanding of trauma. Some veterans spent years institutionalized, not because they were dangerous, but because no one knew what to do with them. Families were told, "Your husband is unstable. Your son may never recover." Many never came home. Chapter 10. Disability claims denied. Veterans suffering from nightmares, anxiety, depression, rage struggled to prove their injuries were real. The VA demanded visible damage. If you were missing a limb, you qualified. If your mind was shattered, you often didn't. Claims were rejected with phrases like "no physical evidence of injury," condition not service-related. As a result, veterans lived without income, families fell into poverty, mental illness worsened, a cruel cycle formed. No benefits, no treatment, deeper collapse. Chapter 11. Alcohol, America's unofficial treatment. With no therapy and no support, veterans turned to what was available: alcohol. By the late 1940s, bars near military bases thrived. Alcoholism among veterans soared. Drunken arrests quietly increased. Doctors often encouraged drinking, believing it calmed nerves. Society didn't see addiction. They saw a drunk veteran who couldn't move on. Veterans were blamed for the very symptoms the war had created. Chapter 12. Women veterans, erased from history. Over 350,000 American women served in World War II. They were nurses, clerks, pilots, WASP, intelligence staff. After the war, many were denied veteran status. Their service was dismissed as temporary help. PTSD symptoms were labeled hysteria. Women veterans struggled in silence. Their trauma was doubly ignored because society wasn't ready to admit women suffered in war. Chapter 13. Black veterans, betrayed at home. African American soldiers fought fascism abroad while facing racism at home. After returning, many were denied VA hospitals. Segregated facilities offered inferior care. Housing loans were blocked by redlining. Some black veterans were beaten or killed simply for wearing their uniforms in the South. They asked, "What exactly did we fight for?" For many, the war ended hope, not strengthened it. Chapter 14. The Cold War Era. New Wars, Old Wounds. As America shifted focus to the Soviet Union, nuclear fear, Korea, World War II veterans were pushed aside. The government moved on. Budgets shifted. Attention faded. But trauma doesn't follow political timelines. Untreated veterans aged into chronic mental illness, homelessness, early death, and their stories faded with them. Chapter 15. The Culture of Silence. Perhaps the greatest failure wasn't medical or political, it was cultural. America worshipped the idea of the strong soldier. Men were expected to provide, protect, stay silent. Admitting pain was seen as weakness. So veterans hid symptoms, refused help, died quietly. Their children inherited the trauma without understanding its source. Chapter 16. Warning Signs Ignored. By the 1950s, warning signs were everywhere. Rising veteran suicides, homeless encampments, alcohol-related deaths, family breakdowns. But the nation was busy celebrating prosperity. The cost of victory was inconvenient, so it was ignored. Chapter 17. When Heroes Disappeared into the Streets. By the mid-1950s, a quiet tragedy unfolded across American cities. In New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, men who once wore U.S. Army uniforms now slept under bridges, in abandoned buildings, in railway stations. They were invisible to a nation celebrating prosperity. The post-war economic boom created suburbs and shopping malls, but left behind those who couldn't fit into normal life anymore. Chapter 18. The Face of the Homeless Veteran. Most homeless WW2 veterans shared common traits: nightmares that never stopped, alcohol or drug dependency, difficulty trusting people, deep shame. They avoided shelters because crowds triggered panic, authority figures caused anxiety, rules felt like military discipline. Many chose the streets because, at least here, I can breathe. These men weren't weak, they were wounded. Chapter 19. Criminalized for Surviving. Instead of receiving care, homeless veterans were often treated as criminals. Police arrested them for public intoxication, vagrancy, loitering. Courts sentenced them to short jail terms, forced labor, psychiatric institutions. No treatment plans, no counseling, no follow-up. Prison became a substitute for mental health care. Chapter 20. From Battlefields to Prison Cells. A disturbing number of WW2 veterans ended up incarcerated. Inside prisons, trauma went untreated. Violence was common. Alcohol withdrawal caused breakdowns. Many veterans felt, "I survived the war," only to be buried alive at home. Some spent decades cycling between jail, streets, mental hospitals, a loop with no escape. Chapter 21. The Invisible Suicide Epidemic. Suicide among WW2 veterans was rarely discussed. Families hid it. Newspapers avoided it. Officials downplayed it. But the numbers were staggering. Men who survived Normandy, Ardennes, the Pacific Island battles ended their lives quietly, in garages, in hotel rooms, on riverbanks. No medals, no headlines, just silence. Chapter 22. America Looks Away. The 1950s sold a dream: white picket fences, happy nuclear families, economic success. Homeless veterans didn't fit the story. So society blamed them. He drinks too much. He couldn't adjust. He wasted his opportunity. Rarely did anyone ask, what did the war do to him? Chapter 23. Media breaks the silence. In the late 1960s and 1970s, investigative journalists began uncovering the truth. Photographs showed elderly veterans sleeping on sidewalks, men with service pins begging for change, veterans dying alone. America was forced to confront an uncomfortable question. How did the greatest generation end up forgotten? Chapter 24. The Domino Effect. Future Wars, Same Mistakes. The suffering of WW2 veterans became a warning, but one the government failed to fully learn from. Korea, Vietnam, later Iraq and Afghanistan. Each war repeated the pattern. Soldiers sent to fight, victory declared, veterans left to struggle. World War II veterans became the first victims of a recurring national failure. Chapter 25. The Children Left Behind. Many children of WW2 veterans grew up in unstable homes. They witnessed rage, withdrawal, alcohol abuse, without understanding why. This trauma passed quietly from generation to generation. The war ended, but its psychological impact did not. Chapter 26. Late Recognition, Too Late for Many. By the 1980s, PTSD was finally recognized. VA reforms began. Mental health services improved. But for most WW2 veterans, it was too late. They had already lost families, lost homes, lost themselves. Recognition came decades after abandonment. Chapter 27. Unsung Heroes, Unmarked Graves. Many homeless veterans died without funerals, family, recognition. Some were buried in unmarked graves. No flag, no honor guard, no acknowledgement of service. History moved on. Chapter 28. When America finally found the word PTSD. For decades, World War II veterans lived without a name for their suffering. Not until the 1970s, after the Vietnam War, did the term post-traumatic stress disorder enter medical language. Only then did America finally admit, trauma doesn't fade with time. Psychological wounds can be permanent. Silence doesn't heal. But for most World War II veterans, this recognition came 30 years too late. They had already destroyed relationships, lost careers, died early. The diagnosis arrived after the damage was done. Chapter 29. VA Reforms, Progress Built on Failure. Public pressure forced the government to act. The Veterans Administration slowly expanded mental health services, disability recognition, long-term care facilities. Mistakes made with World War II veterans became case studies, but reform was reactive, not proactive. Each generation of veterans paid the price before change arrived. Chapter 30. The Truth About the Greatest Generation. History books often describe World War II veterans as strong, silent, unbreakable. That image hides a painful truth. They were silent not because they were unaffected, but because no one was listening. Strength became survival. Silence became protection. Their suffering didn't contradict their greatness. It defined the cost of it. Chapter 31. What World War II taught and what it didn't. World War II exposed a critical truth. You can win a war and still lose your soldiers. Victory without care is abandonment. The real lesson wasn't military, it was moral. and America didn't fully learn it. Chapter 32, The Modern Veteran Crisis, a direct line from 1945. Today's veterans' struggles didn't appear suddenly. They are rooted in World War II. The patterns are familiar: PTSD, homelessness, addiction, suicide. Different wars, same consequences. World War II veterans were the first generation to suffer these wounds on a massive scale without a safety net. Chapter 33, Why Remembering Matters. Remembering isn't about guilt, it's about responsibility. Every homeless veteran today is a reminder of promises once broken. Every untreated trauma is a warning history already gave us. Forgetting is easy. Care requires effort. Chapter 34, The Quiet Heroes Who Never Stopped Fighting. Many World War II veterans fought until their final breath, not against enemies, but against memories. They didn't ask for pity, they asked for understanding. Most never received it. Chapter 35, The Moral Debt. America asked everything of them: youth, health, innocence, and gave back parades, not healing. That debt doesn't disappear with time. It passes to each generation. Chapter 36, A Promise Still Waiting to be Kept. The final question isn't historical, it's present. What does a nation owe those who fight for it? If the answer stops at medals and speeches, then the cycle will repeat. The war ended in 1945, but for millions of American soldiers, the battle followed them home. They fought in silence, they suffered in shadows, and many were forgotten. History remembers victories, but honor demands we remember the cost, because the true measure of a nation is not how it fights wars, but how it treats those who survive them.